Hey everybody, Jeff Miller here, head of GMAT instruction with Target Test Prep. I'm excited today to do a fun webinar here on advanced number property strategies. Now, part of the webinar will be discussing strategies of how to study for quant in general, how to get your study plan going, some thoughts on number properties as well, just as a topic as a whole. And then we're going to focus our number property discussions on remainders today. Because that is one big part of number properties. And look, number properties itself is it's a pretty massive topic. So, we wouldn't be able to cover it all in the hour anyway. It's an incredibly important topic. So yeah, there's a lot I want to talk about regarding remainders, and we're going to be doing a presentation. Feel free to leave your comments as I'm sharing. I will warn you though, when I'm looking at my presentation, because I'm sharing the screen, I won't see your comments. So I'll stop after each slide to check out if you guys have any questions. Now remember, number properties in general, it's a really important topic, whether or not you're talking about getting a Q51 or even a Q48, right? So there's a ton that can be asked in number properties. From a Target Test Prep perspective, it's our biggest possible chapter because we have so much going on in it. It ranges from even and odd numbers to positive and negative numbers to divisibility to remainders, which we'll be doing today, consecutive integers, factorial divisibility, consecutive products, LCM, GCF. And yes, if you're looking at, hey, what am I going to see the most of on any given GMAT, you can usually take the guess that it's number properties, but it's also huge. So it's relative to how much time you'll have to spend studying it versus, say, combinations and permutations, probability, work and rate questions. So I guess what I'm saying is, on a general macro scale, all of these concepts are important. There's nothing I would skip over. Including number properties, of course. But yeah, if you're scoring at a high level, there's a lot of really great and cool number property questions that you're probably going to be presented with on your GMAT. Now, I want to get into setting up a quant study plan. There's a little bit of macro stuff I want to talk about here, and then some micro stuff on this a future slide here. Now, if any of you, and I'm just going to check and make sure there's no questions, which there's not. If any of you are just starting off with your GMAT prep, there's some steps you want to take to start thinking about how you're going to study for this test. Now, you never want to jump in with 2 feet without slowly kind of ramping up, because at the beginning of your prep, you do want to start off by getting a baseline score. You can see that step 3. The reason it's not step 1, and I was just talking to a student literally yesterday, he is considering applying round 3 for some really great programs. In fact, he's most interested in Cornell. He's never taken the GMAT before, and he would need to be done by sometime in, I believe it was late April, right? So I said, you got to take a baseline score, but spend a few days. He's using our course. So I said, read the intro chapters, then take your practice test so you have a fighting shot. Because if you jump into a practice test and you have no idea what a data sufficiency question is, then you're going to get clobbered, but it's not going to really be based on your skill sets. It's going to be based on your lack of knowledge in the GMAT in general. So whatever you got to do, go to MBA.com, read about the GMAT. Go to blogs. We have a ton of blogs on what the GMAT is. Do a trial to a course like TTP, for example, and read the intro stuff. Get familiar with the GMAT, then take your practice test, and even do some practice questions first. But then, yes, take your practice test. Take the practice test seriously. Make sure that you are following test day conditions. You're not bringing a handheld calculator. You're not trying to pause the exam. You're not taking it over a 2-day period. That score is important because it's going to show your base versus where you need to get to. It's the same thing if you're training for a marathon, a 5K, and you want to know where you're at, you gotta, jump in, run a 5K, and see what your time looks like. Once you have your baseline score, you're gonna start. You're gonna try to jump into your study plan, but you're gonna need prep materials. Obviously, I love Target Test Prep. Be a great course to use. If you're unsure of what's on the market, go to GMAT Club, look at what people have been talking about, writing about, go to the reviews section, sign up for some trials. You know what I mean? We offer a full access trial because we want students to see our course with their own eyes and be able to make a proper decision. And that's why it's also for 5 days. Whatever course you select should have the foolproof study schedule. We'll talk about more about that in the moment. But in general, the study schedule is what you're doing from A to Z. You need a roadmap. The thing that I think frustrates GMAT students the most, or one of the things, is they sit down to study, then they spend 30 minutes thinking about what it is they have to study. There's nothing more frustrating than that because it's wasteful. And I know none of you have time to waste. I'm sure you guys have full-time jobs or you're full-time students. So when you sit down to study for the GMAT, you want to know what you're doing immediately. And I certainly don't blame you for having that mindset. Okay, moving on. I see there's still no questions. And again, feel free to ask them as we go through this presentation. Now, just some strategies in general. If you guys are going for a high quant score like a Q50 or 51, I first and foremost want you all to understand that you all are capable of getting that score. You have to perform well on test day, don't get me wrong, but you're capable of getting it. Now, the thing that I also want you to think about is, depending on who you are as an applicant, where you're applying, you might not need a Q50 or Q51. And I don't want you to get too hung up in the percentiles of quant scores because they're a little wonky, because people look at a Q47, for example, from a percentile perspective, it doesn't look that pretty, right? It actually looks fairly low if you just look at the sheer number. But remember, a Q47 is 4 raw points off a Q51. So it's not really that low when you look at it that way. But nonetheless, there's things everybody needs to do to get to that point. Starting off with a strong foundation, right? Don't jump into some book and try to cycle through thousands and thousands of questions, right? Don't do that. It's not worth it because things are going to be very randomized. You don't want to build your skills based on reading solutions to the problems you're getting wrong, right? You want to build that foundation and you want to work up to it. And again, we'll talk about what that looks like as far as your study plan. But really, in short, it's about topical learning, starting with the basics and moving to more advanced stuff. You'll see here algebraic translations. One of the things that if I'm talking to a student and doing a consult with them, okay, what are you struggling with in GMAT math? Oh, well, algebra is tough. Well, you know what? Algebra is everywhere on the GMAT. Yes, there are linear equations that are strictly algebraic or quadratic equations, which are strictly algebraic. But what about general word problems? Algebra, geometry even, a lot of times algebra, ratios, algebra, percents, algebra. It's everywhere. So if you don't build those skills early on, it's going to be difficult. And that's similar with word translations too. There's a lot of word problems, and it's not just in that general word problem category. Rates are a word problem, work, ratios, percents, combinations, permutations. There's even word problems in geometry. So developing that skill is going to be really, really important. As far as you move through your study plan, embrace your weaknesses, right? Don't run from your weaknesses. I think we want to do that a lot because we're sitting down to study. We had a long day of work. Heck, I'd rather do the stuff I'm strong in, but don't do that. Find those weaknesses, seek them out, and turn those into your strengths, because the feeling that you're going to get and the confidence you're going to get by taking something that was once weak and making it strong is going to be a game changer for your mindset. It's going to help you stay motivated throughout the process, and it's going to help you, just really get to where you're going. Because if you ignore those weaknesses, believe me, they're going to come up on test day and you're going to get bit. Um, some questions. Yes, when you are taking the GMAT itself, you don't want to leave anything blank. Um, Random guesses are totally fine. Now, in an ideal situation, you're not going to have to make that many random guesses because you're going to be pretty rock solid. But everyone has things that they struggle with on the GMAT. Sometimes it's questions that you think you should be getting right, and those are the toughest ones to give up on, right? And those are the ones that are usually most killer, where you see a question, you know it's in your wheelhouse, and for whatever reason you can't get it. That's the worst feeling you can have on the GMAT because your mind is not going to want to give up, but you're going to have a very strict timing strategy that says, you know what, I've spent three minutes on this. I really think I should be able to get it, but you just don't have the time to waste. You're going to have to take a guess and move on from that. So yes, try to answer all the questions in a given section. Um, I mean, no, you're not going to get a different type of penalty for a wrong guess. The bigger penalty will come as if you don't finish a section in totality. So yes, always look to finish the section. But again, in a perfect world, you're not going to be in this place where you're getting a ton of stuff wrong or having to take all of these random guesses because you're going to be well prepared for your exam. You see what I mean? I think you do. Okay, correct. There is no option. You can't skip on the GMAT. The GRE, you can. That's a different. Um, no, there is no penalty for guessing. Getting a question wrong is getting a question wrong. Whether you guess or you just choose the wrong answer, it'll affect the algorithm in the same way. But you can't skip questions on the GMAT. That's not something that is offered in that exam. The GRE, you can. You can skip questions. You can mark them for review and come back to them within a particular section and re-answer them. But on the GMAT, you cannot. You have to put a response in a question. So you're never skipping, you're guessing and moving on. And we have a really cool blog on when to guess, estimated guesses, and things like that that you guys can check out. So yeah, that hopefully that covers that question. So moving back to the presentation. So yes, your weaknesses, embrace them, eliminate them, hit them head on. You know, whatever resources you're using, hopefully have really powerful analytics so you can see where you're weak and then deal with them, right? Because the thing is, if you don't have any sort of analytics or error tracker, you can easily hide from them and say, well, I think I'm okay in this. But, you know, when you're staring in the face of what those analytics look like, oh, wow, I have a 15% correct rate in, least common multiple. Okay, I need to really work on that, for example. So make sure you have some analytics. And, this kind of bleeds into you must become comfortable being uncomfortable. It's the same thing. Like, the GMAT studying is not always going to be a cakewalk. So you got to understand that it's going to be an uncomfortable process. And at first, it's going to be really overwhelming. I don't care what your starting point is, it's an overwhelming thing to do, especially because you're usually layering it on top of other important things that you have going on in your life. So it's going to take up a big part of your mental energy and mental capacity, and you're going to have to just find a way to make room for that. And during your GMAT prep, there's probably things you're going to have to stop doing just to be able to have the capacity and motivation to get to where you need to go. Avoiding careless mistakes. I mean, that's huge too, but that's more of a situation of real time on the GMAT. Careless mistakes are killer. I talk to students about them a lot. There's things you can do to avoid them. I mean, some careless mistakes are due to doing things in your head or making an assumption at the last minute in a data efficiency question, right? Don't do those things, at least initially, until you can skip steps or do stuff in your head. Initially, do everything out as full as you possibly can, right? Because if you don't, yeah, you're going to run into issues and it's going to really take a toll on your score. So you not only need to avoid them, but you need to understand when those careless mistakes are actually happening so you can be in a position where you know you're making them, and then you make fixes to your process, to your thought process to fix them. If you just ignore the fact that they're happening, then you're just going to continue to make them. So a lot of being successful in GMAT prep is being honest with yourself, being forthright with yourself about the things that you're doing right and the things you're doing wrong. And then finally, trying to get one solid resource is great. Like I said, go to GMAT Club, sign up for trials, and check everything out and make a decision that you think is going to work well for you. The blog that I mentioned, yeah, yes, I'll try, we will try to share those shortly. I just can't go off this screen at the moment. You got it. You can't leave. Don't leave any questions blank. You need to make sure you have the time to take guesses. So if you have 6 questions left and you have 1 minute, make sure that you put answers for all those questions within that minute. So you got to be disciplined. You got to be on top of the clock, and you can't be in a situation where you are leaving anything blank. You just got to be prepared. And look, if you're taking practice exams and stuff leading up to your GMAT, then I don't think you're going to be in a situation where you're going to say, oh, crap, I just forgot to put in the last 5 questions or something. Okay, moving on. All right, my bread and butter. I love talking about this. There's tons of YouTube videos that I've made talking about this. Best way to study for the GMAT is the name if you want to, and we have a blog as well that talks about this, but I'll talk about it here. A successful GMAT Quant study plan. Keep in mind, this stuff relates to verbal too. But, when we started TTP about 15 years ago, this was kind of the core foundation of what we wanted to build, and we did build it. Took a long time, but it's paid off, right? Because I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it and are using it. But topical learning and topical practice is so key because there's so much stuff you have to learn to be successful in GMAT Quant. So much stuff. The stuff itself isn't necessarily super advanced or challenging. It's high school math. We know this. But it's a lot. And so going back to what I said earlier, if you're just doing random learning, you're never going to feel like you get your footing in any one topic. So you need the repetition, you need the topical learning. And it's not to say that mixed practice isn't something you eventually need, but to start, topical learning is key. So what is topical learning? It's focusing on one topic. Let's say linear and quadratic equations. You learn about single variable equations, double variable equations, adding equations, subtracting equations, foiling quadratics, factoring quadratics, difference of squares, quadratic identities, factor by grouping, etc. There's probably more that off the top of my head. That's a lot of stuff. Then you practice just quadratic equations or that chapter to see where you're weak, right? You do 100+ questions, whatever it is. You do them in sets. Yeah, you can time yourself, but at first, timing isn't necessarily something that's super important. It's just about being accurate, seeing where you're weak, and then filling in gaps, because that practice after you learn something is going to show you very easily what you know and what you don't know, right? Oh, I got 50% of my difference of squares questions wrong. Well, I got to go back and fill in those gaps. It's a mix of reading through the solutions, going back to when you originally learned it, and then rinsing and repeating and moving on to the next quant or verbal topic when you're done and you feel like you have a high level of mastery. Now, that's something else that's important. This goes for any course, whether it's TTP or something else. You need to be an active learner. If you sit there and you watch a video and you don't write anything down, there's a very good possibility that you're going to be in a situation where you don't retain the stuff that you're learning, right? You need to put things in your own words, and you need to ensure that they make sense to you. And then with those notes, you can also make flashcards. I love flashcards. We have a flashcard app on TTP now, which is really cool. with some pre-made flashcards for students. Students are loving it so far. You can also make your own on our course as well, which is great. You can also make handwritten flashcards, which is what I did back in the day. But I don't think when I was studying for the GMAT, there was, I mean, heck, I don't even think the iPhone existed at that point. So there weren't many like flashcard apps. The point is, get that stuff down, study on the go, because you don't always want to just do your studying when you have to sit at a desk, sit at a table. If you have 15 minutes to spare, pull out those flashcards, turn on the app, cycle through them, because there's so many small things you need to learn for the GMAT, that if you're not constantly looking at it, you can forget it. You can forget it. And that's where the engage and consistent review through notes and problem sets is concerned. Talked about the notes, mixed problem sets, right? That's something we have in our TTP study plan. You go through the first 4 chapters of like number properties, linear and quadratics, exponents and roots, absolutes. And after that, we give you a mixed problem set to ensure that those topics have stuck, and anything that hasn't, you'll see clearly and say, okay, I got to go in and fill in those gaps. Now, let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, so this is important. I want to be very clear about what I said. Number properties is important, but it's also huge. So the weight of number properties versus how the time commitment it takes to learn isn't greater than, let's say, I've done this research in TTP. Rates, work, combinations, permutations, and probability is about the same size in lesson content and problem content as number properties. Is it quite possible that you'll see as many as questions from those 4 topics on your GMAT as you will number properties? It is. So net, what I'm saying is that doesn't make number properties more important than those 4 topics. And in the blog that we wrote about what topics are most important on the GMAT, we state a lot, and this is my philosophy, they're all important. There's nothing that you can really skip. It's a 31 question test. You don't know what you're going to get and from what angle, so you just got to be prepared with all of these topics. Your other question, if we are left with 2 questions at the end, 30, 40 seconds, I would say attempt 1. Do your best on getting it right if you think you can do it quickly, and then guess on the last one. Don't leave anything blank. So yeah, I would say take a very quick guess on the last one. But remember, make sure to answer that second to last question with, 12 seconds left. So you can immediately click an answer, click confirm, and then wrap up the section. All right, back to my presentation here. Now, another important thing, and then we're going to get into some cool practice questions. Take practice tests when you're, besides the baseline, when you're done with your learning phase of your prep. You do not need to take practice tests every weekend. You certainly don't need to do it before you've learned all the topics, because you want the data from those practice tests to be usable, right? Like if you take a practice test halfway through your prep to gauge where you're at, and you don't do well because you saw coordinate geometry, which you haven't done, geometry, which you haven't done, combinations, which you haven't done, probability, which you haven't done, you're going to be pissed. And you're going to be like, well, why aren't I seeing the improvement? So, the fact is, it's just not worth it. Save them. Learn all the stuff you have to learn, then test your knowledge, and then you can really use that data. That's on top of the fact that you only have 6 official practice exams, and those are the best ones to take. I mean, sure, you can reset the 2 free ones. That gives you 8 total, but still, don't waste them. Wait to the end, schedule accordingly, take them when you finish the learning phase, and then the data from those will be very helpful, and you'll be able to use it to see where you're at. The score will also be meaningful because you're going to have to see at this point, am I near my score goal? And then, of course, you can make arrangements based on those scores and plan accordingly. But yeah, don't be in that situation where you think you got to take a practice test every weekend. No, I wouldn't. I think the GMAT is unpredictable in what you're going to be given on test day. But no, I do not think that if you're scoring high in mocks, it's so unpredictable that you won't be able to reach your target score. No, I don't agree with that. I've worked with students in the past 15 years. I've tracked their, what they're doing in practice exams, and I've seen what they've done on the real GMAT. 9 times out of 10, if someone doesn't hit up to their score goal in the GMAT and they've been crushing practice exams, there's an anxiety issue. A small sliver of those people have needed to get accommodations, and that has changed the game for them as well. Um, Sometimes there's a false confidence issue, but no, I would say it is quite predictable. A very, very small percentage when they come to me and aren't hitting their score goal despite how the practice exams have gone, can I not diagnose them with something, performance anxiety, generalized anxiety, as I said, something with accommodation. So no, I think if you're prepping the right way and then crushing your practice exams, you should be able to get in that range on your GMAT. All right, so what you guys came here for was to do some fun practice, and we've got remainders. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to give everybody a minute or two to do this problem out, and then I am going to go through my solution. But first, I want to give you guys a second to do your thing with this question, and I'm going to set a timer here for like a minute, and I'll peek in and see what answers you guys are putting in, and then we'll talk about the result. I will tell you with number properties, or with remainders rather, there's something really cool is that you can focus on plugging numbers or you can focus on the remainder formula. And these are all viable options. These are all viable options of how you can attack remainders. I'm going to show you why I really like plugging for most of them, starting with this question here. So take a stab at it, everybody. And I've got my timer set. I'll peek on your answer choices in a second, and then I'll go through my solution. Just going to peek. I see your geometry question. I'll answer that in a second. Can you guys see this question if I have it like this, not in presentation mode? Or is this tough to see? I can't see your questions when it is. Oh, good. Okay. Perfect. So put your answers in the comment box as you get them. I will mention to you. I have to put it in presentation mode when I write, but I will address the question that was just asked. No, I would not say geometry is a minority. Geometry is also a huge topic, but you just don't know how many you're going to see. I mean, you could see 2 geometry questions, but that's a lot. It's only a 31 question test. All right, I see some answers flowing in here. Now, my question to everybody who's live with me, and I like participation, it makes this more fun for everybody. Did you guys use the remainder formula, which I haven't even mentioned about, or did you guys plug in a number for X? Any thoughts on that? Did anyone plug in a number, or did you use the remainder formula? Okay, remainder formula, we've got one taker on that. Wow, a lot of remainder formulas. Okay, so this will be interesting because I'm going to show you guys how to plug here. Any pluggers? Going once, going twice. No pluggers. Okay, great. So I can show you guys a process that maybe will be helpful. The remainder formula seems like what you should do, right? When we have this whole idea of what we should be doing on the GMAT, but I don't mind plugging, to be honest with you. Question is, what do I plug, right? A lot of people will say, hey, I'm going to use, X is 87. Can you use x as 87? Of course. But is it better to plug a smaller number? It is. The smallest number you can use when x is divided by 82 with a remainder of 5 is 5. People forget that all the time. So if I say x is 5, and then I use it here, 5 plus 11 is 16. 16 over 82 is a quotient of 0, remainder 16, and there's your answer. To me, that's quicker than even saying like, hey, like I know what you guys did, x is equal to 82q plus 5, then adding 16 to both sides, giving you, x plus 16 is 82q plus 82q, or excuse me, plus 11, not 16. Let me see if I can find my eraser. Better be an eraser here. Weird. Well, let me just clear this off here. But I think, oh yeah, I can I can get rid of my annotations here and then I'll redo it. But the point is you're adding it to the 11. So you're adding 11 to both sides and then dividing that by 41. So the question is, I think plugging in a real number saves a little bit of time, and I'll go back and just redo what you guys did. X is equal to 82q plus 5. Sorry, you're at 11 to both sides. X plus 11 is equal to 82q plus 16. Then you divide that whole thing by 41. I mean, the fact is, like, yeah, you can do this and you still get a remainder of 16. There's just something for me where, like, if I can plug in a very quick number and do very little math, I'm going to do that 10 days out of 10. Does that make sense for everybody? All right, I'm going to assume that it does. Now, why am I talking about plugging in? Well, I'm talking about it because I'm going to skip this data sufficiency question. We're going to come back to it. I'm going to go to my question number 3. This is going to be fun. I'm very, very interested to see, yeah, 16 divided by 41. Exactly. That's why I rewrote it. I'm very, very interested to see how you guys handle this question because, man, I have a really easy way to deal with it. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. I'm going to have you do, or whatever, a minute, minute and a half. I'll peek in on you in a second. I'll go full screen. Do the question any way you want to do it. I'm going to show you my method when you're done. And then we'll go from there. So have at it, everybody. Okay, start putting in your answers when you have them. Just did a little peek. I'll give you guys another 30, 45 seconds. Any other answers here? Definitely a fun one. Keep them coming. All right, I like it, AG. Plug in numbers. You're my person. I plug in numbers here too. And I didn't used to. And then once I did it and I said, holy crap, this is so easy, it made me very happy. All right, we got a bunch of answers. Who are my pluggers here? Who's on Team Plug? Or who's not? Either yes, you plugged, or no, you did not. What do I see? Ah, we have a new team member, another team member. Anyone else? Well, I am teaching you the plug method. That's why we're doing these questions. Oh, we have one non-team member. All right. Well, I will reiterate, everybody. You don't have to be on this team, but this is something I want to show you guys just to show you the simplicity of it. Now, using the remainder formula here is even more complicated because you're going to have to end up multiplying two versions of the remainder formula together and then foiling. So it's up to you. If you can do that in 45 seconds, great. It's taking you 2 minutes, you might want to reconsider. So let me show you something here. Now, the key with successfully plugging is using a small enough number where you're not multiplying big numbers. So if we're saying n peanuts can be divided into 9 bags with 6 left over, that means n can be 6 because it would give you a quotient of 0 and a remainder of 6. Another bag of m peanuts can be divided into 12 smaller bags with 4 left over. That means m can be 4. So all you're doing is 6 times 4 divided by 18, which is 24 divided by 18, which is 0. Oh, excuse me, not 0. Don't know where the eraser is, so I'm just going to scribble it. It's 1 remainder 6. So I don't know about everybody here, and I can't see your comments quite yet. I'm going to get off full screen in a second. I personally believe this is a no-brainer way to deal with this question. Okay. But if you're stuck and you like the remainder formula, I'm not going to tell you to completely change your ways. It's just a good way to handle it. I feel like it's what's the catch? There is no catch. There's no catch at all. It's just that remainders come in patterns. So whatever value you choose for n and whatever value you choose for m, as long as it's accurate based on what they're giving you, it works. But you don't want to use huge numbers. Like, the mistake would be to make n, let's see, if there's 6 left over, to make it like 15, for example. You don't want to do that because then if you make n 15 and you make m 16, that's a bigger number that you're multiplying than to have to divide by 18. The key is when you plug using small numbers. That's the key. Yes, it will save you at least a minute. Now, there are times where plugging doesn't work. We're going to talk about them. I think we have time to do that. We're going to talk about that in a couple, I think 2 more questions we have. But I want to go back and do a DS question where you actually will have to plug, and that is this question here. I don't even think the remainder formula will accurately work here. So I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to deal with this. Now that most of you are expert pluggers, I think that, we could be in good shape here. You can't simplify with divisibility. Yeah, people make that mistake all the time. Never, ever, ever can you simplify when you're getting a remainder. So yes, don't do that. All right, I see some answers trickling in. A lot of wrong answers, which is fun for me because I always like to be able to teach why you guys did something wrong. Um, so let's have at it. Now, plugging is what has to happen in this question, but you got to be very systematic. When you plug in remainder questions in data sufficiency to disprove something, you can't randomly plug. You got to be very structured, one by one, move up that mountain slowly but surely. And what do I mean by that? First of all, there's really nothing to do with the given. You just say n over 3 remainder is what? Now you go to statement 1 and you're going to make your list. N plus 3 is divisible by 5. So what can n be? N can be 2, and then just start adding 5 to it. It's basically an evenly spaced set. It can be 7, it can be 12, it can be 17, it can be 22, 27, 32. Okay, we'll stop there. Now, do I need to test this? Not really. I mean, I can look at it. Like 12 over 3, remainder is 0. 17 over 3, remainder is something. Insufficient. I'm going to change the color here as well. Okay, statement 2, I'm going to kind of do at the bottom to say, because that's where my room is. N is divisible by 4. Well, this is simple. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. Yeah, I'm cheating a little because I know I need to get up to 32. Same deal. 3 can go into 12, remainder 0. 3 goes into 8, there's some remainder. Insufficient. Now, what do you do looking at these together? You got to match up values that work in both lists. That's why we were very systematic with our list. What's the first number that matches up? 12. What's the remainder of 12 over 3? Remainder is 0. What's the next number? Scan your list. Scanning, scanning, scanning. Oh, 32. What's the remainder when you have... So sorry, I was actually right. A bunch of you guys were correct, and in a small group of you were not correct. 32 over 3. What's the remainder? Remainder is 0. So all of you C people out there were correct. I don't know what I was thinking. But this is how you do it. You got to be incredibly systematic with your list, and then you pull out what matches. Once you get two things that sync up like this, 12 and 32, it's a pretty much a sure shot that you're going to know that you have a pattern in place, and you're always going to get that remainder of 0. So that is why the answer is C. Oh, wait a second. Let me go back to that. Oh, yes. I was looking at statement 2. Good call. So the answer is E. So let me go back to that. Let me make my list. Do something fell wrong. So yes, if we go back to our list here, 2, 7, 12, 17, 22, 27, 32. Go back to statement 2, 4, 8, 12, 16. It's funny, my original intuition was correct. Yes, 32. So we find what matches up. Once again, great call, everybody. That was a brain fart. Be careful of those. 12 over 3, yes, remainder of 0. 32 over 3 is a remainder of 2. So those who said that the answer here was C originally, my guess of what you did is you noticed that the 12s match up, right? And you forgot to keep your list going and checking to 32. So when you're dealing with a plugging DS question, make sure you either find a pattern or you find something that kind of contradicts. In this case, getting a remainder 0 when it's 12 and getting a remainder of 2 when n is 32. So that's why the answer here is E. All right. Any questions about that from anybody? You can solve using remainder formula. I've never tried this question doing it. I just wouldn't. I mean, look, when I can literally just plug in numbers and follow those numbers. Now, granted, yes, I had a brain fart. Not sure why I decided 32 is divisible by 3, but that usually won't happen, right? It's just so easy. I mean, just look at what I did here. I said in statement 1, here's my evenly spaced set. Add 5 to each value, each preceding value, right? Statement 2, list out the multiples of 4. Find 2 numbers that carry over between the lists, divide them by 3, get different remainders, call it a day, right? Like to me personally, I just don't see an easier way to do it. But again, there are multiple ways to deal with these questions. This is what I recommend and would prefer using here. So let me clear the screen. I think we have one more good one. All right. So for all of those who are thinking, well, heck, the remainder formula is important, I want to continue to use it. This is one of those times where plugging in random numbers really isn't going to work. You're forced to use the remainder formula here. And another thing I will say, when questions look ugly and yucky, there's usually a pretty cool way to deal with them. And this is one of those times. Decimal remainders used to scare the heck out of me. Once I learned how to do them, I was like, oh, wow, this is fantastic. They're pretty stinking easy. So take a stab at this, everybody. And my hint to you all is the remainder formula is now going to be a necessary component of this. So yeah, let's see what you can do here. See if we have some answers trickling in here. Oh, that's good. This is an easy one. Fantastic. All right, cool. So a lot of good answers here, a lot of correct answers. So this is the one we'll wrap up with. What we've got here is us being able to use the remainder formula. So if you bring the Q over, this is going to look a little yucky, but you can bring this and make this look like the remainder formula, which would be 3 plus 16 over 100. Now, the remainder formula in general looks something like this. P over Q equals some quotient, we'll call it Z, plus remainder over Q. So this is the remainder, that R term. P over Q is equal to 3 plus 4 over 25, right? We've reduced the 16 down, which you have to do. So the remainder is a remainder of 4 at the bare minimum. Well, what must divide into 4? That would be 2 and 4, and that's 1 and 2, and the answer is C. So if you're well versed in the remainder formula, then this problem is pretty straightforward for you. It sounds like it was for most of you. And, this is kind of a wrap on um, remainders. So that's kind of been fun teaching you guys this stuff. The last step is just reducing down 16 over 100 to 4 over 25. And then the remainder is 4. What divides into 4? Well, 2 and 4 divide into 4. All right, we'll clear the screen. Oh, looks like it got cleared. So that, can you say the quotient is 25? Well, we do not have the problem up anymore. You don't need to deal with the quotient in this question. It's really just the remainder. Well, we teach this formula in target test prep. It's a really cool formula, and we have a huge lesson on this in number properties. Now, I'm trying to see if I can get my PowerPoint back. Don't know if I can. No, for some reason it went black. Let me see if I can fix that. So there's a couple more slides we could talk about here. Let me see. Share screen. Share window. It's not letting me. Well, that's fine, guys. We can wrap up now. So we have a couple more minutes. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I will tell you that everything we did here today is part of target test prep. All these questions, we have a super, super robust number properties chapter as well as all of our quant stuff. But it's super cool. All these concepts have been, we go through. So if something like remainders and divisibility and all that fun stuff is something you want to learn about, check out our course. We offer a full access 5-day trial. It's great. I'm sure you've seen many people write about it on GMAT Club and other places. So yeah, check it out. These were all number property remainder questions. Yes. So if there are no other questions here, I thank you guys for hanging out today. It was a lot of fun doing practice questions with you, and hopefully you learned a thing or two and enjoyed working through some questions. And if you need anything, you can reach out to us over at Target Test Prep. We're always around. We're always happy to help. You'll see us on GMAT Club responding to various questions and things like that. And I look forward to coming back. I'm sure I'll be back in a couple weeks to do some more fun stuff with you guys. And yeah, have a great week. Have a great weekend. And thank you again, everybody. Talk to you soon.